Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Major Carl Front. I am honored to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for the 9/11 commemoration, honoring the fallen and those protecting the homelands. The presiding officer for today's ceremony is General Charles H. Jacoby, Jr., Commander, North American Aerospace Defense Command and United States Northern Command. Please rise for the arrival of the official party, the rendering of honors, and the singing of the national anthems of Canada and the United States.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons' command. Qu'à ton bras s'est porté le pays, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, oh, the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Chaplain Matthew Bortz, the 21st Space Wing Commander Chaplain, will now provide the invocation.
Heavenly Father, we gather on the anniversary of great suffering on a day of calamity. We mourn this world that bears much conflict, violence, and death. Yet these do not have the last word. We celebrate a world that bears much love, kindness, and life. We who take comfort in love, joy and kindness, and hope in life stand with those who suffer pain and conflict, horror and violence, and terror in the face of death. Grant that together we may, by your grace, Lord, forge a future where cries for relief will be answered, hopes will be renewed, and tears wiped away. Give us the power to do good, to relieve suffering, to extend freedom and hope to all who are oppressed. Give us strength and community to remain faithful to our grand ideals and to your will as we honor the sacrifice of all who have been lost in the pursuit and defense of freedom. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Bortz. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. A special thank you goes out this morning to the United States Air Force Academy Band, Lieutenant Trevor Dessonnier, and Petty Officer Bavon Drummond for sharing your musical and vocal talents with us this morning. At this time, I would like to introduce the members of our official party and recognize our guests of honor and other distinguished guests. Please hold your applause until everyone has been introduced. The Honorable Robert Nicholson, the Minister of National Defense of Canada. Melody Homer, widow of Leroy W. Homer, Jr., First Officer of United Airlines Flight 93. Mrs. Grace Jacoby. The Honorable Joseph Garcia, Lieutenant Governor of Colorado. General and Mrs. John Hyten, Commander, Air Force Space Command. General and Mrs. William Shelton, former Commander, Air Force Space Command. Mr. and Mrs. Don Addy, Chairman of the Colorado 30 Group. Consul General Marcy Grossman, Consul General of Canada in Denver. Consul General Carlos Bello, Consul General of Mexico in Denver. Representing United States Senator Mark Udall, Miss Angela Jocelyn. Representing United States Senator Michael Bennett, Miss Annie Oatman Gardner and Mr. Aaron Torres. Representing Congressman Doug Lamborn, Mr. Lee Colburn. Peggy Littleton, Commissioner, District 5, El Paso County. Mr. Andy Pico, Council Member, District 6, Colorado Springs City Council. We are honored to have a number of active and retired senior military leaders, state and federal representatives, local community leaders, military and civilian members. Welcome, and thank you for attending today's ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce General Charles Jacoby, the Commander of the North American Aerospace Defense Command and United States Northern Command.
It is a perfect day. It is a great day. And I want to thank John Hyten and his weather control satellite for fixing that problem that we thought we were going to have. But I think the chaplain had more to do with it, actually. Distinguished guests, friends from this great Colorado community, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today in this commemoration ceremony. As your NORAD and NORTHCOM commander, I consider it a true privilege to be here with you. You have all heard the impressive list of guests today, but I want to make particular welcome to Lieutenant Governor Garcia, General and Linda Shelton, Don and Susan Addy, and Brigadier General Richard Martin, the Assistant Adjutant General of Colorado. Without their leadership and support, this remembrance would not have been possible. I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work done across all the military commands in this region and the community organizations like 30 Group to make this day possible, and in particular, show off our magnificent Cheyenne Mountain on this very special day. And a special thanks to our guest speakers, Melody Homer and the Minister of Defense of Canada, the Honorable Robert Nicholson, whom I will be introducing in just a moment. We also have in attendance today a group of first responders, civilian and military, who participated in fighting the Waldo Canyon and Black Forest fires and last year's devastating floods here in Colorado. Thank you for being on the front lines in defending this community. And I ask that all of you rise and be recognized, please. Chief, come on. One speaker obvious in his absence today is Deputy Secretary of Defense Bob Wirt. I spoke to him earlier, and I assure you he was eager to participate and fought hard to be here. But the rollout of the President's strategy last night on ISIS and the return of Congress and the inevitable requirements that followed have simply prevented him from joining us. But our international efforts, along with those of Canada, to deal effectively and decisively with the scourge of ISIS is a fitting backdrop to our reflections on the 13th anniversary of 9/11. And now to our keynote speaker. As we work to build a coalition to confront the ISIS threat, we also reflect on how, on 9/11, America's friends and allies stood by us, shoulder to shoulder. And we can say with certainty that no one has stood by us closer than our Canadian partners. Of course, our great tradition of military friendship with Canada predates 2001. It even predates NORAD. And we are currently observing the 100th anniversary of World War I, in which U.S. and Canadian troops, to include my grandfather, fought side by side. And in fact, 70 years ago this week, after some of the most bitter fighting of World War II, U.S. and Canadian forces were engaged together, mopping up remnants of the German army trapped in the Falaise Pocket after the Battle of Normandy. And I have long described our binational relationship as a huge competitive security advantage. But Dwight Eisenhower, unsurprisingly, said it more eloquently than I in 1946. He said, "Each of us has had an abiding faith that our 3,000 miles of common border measure as secure a boundary as the world has ever known, defended as it is by mutual friendship, mightier than guns, tanks, airplanes, and the atomic bomb." It was a decade after that our two nations decided to share air sovereignty for the sake of our common defense through NORAD. And 13 years ago, after the U.S. came under attack, Canadian Special Forces arrived early in Afghanistan, side by side with our own. Thousands more followed, and 158 of them gave the ultimate sacrifice there, defending our shared way of life. Canada and its citizens embraced our people, our cause, and our shared future. Today, Canada is leading the way in the world response to ISIS, the latest manifestation of the murderous extremist ideology. And truly, we know no better friends than our Canadian neighbors. So we are especially honored to have with us today Canada's Minister of National Defense, my boss, the Honorable Robert Nicholson. Minister Nicholson has been a lifelong resident of Niagara Falls, and as a member of Parliament for that district, represents over 120,000 Canadians who share a border with the United States. After earning a law degree from the University of Windsor and serving his community as a lawyer, he was elected to the Canadian House of Commons in 1984. And during many years of service to the Canadian people, he has served in key positions in government, including the Minister of Science and Small Business and the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. In July of 2013, Minister Nicholson was appointed to his present role as the Minister of National Defense. Sir, it has been a privilege to have had the opportunity to work with you for over the last 14 months. You are a true patriot. Thank you for your dedication to our mutual defense, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, General Jacoby, for those kind words, and to General Hyten, Lieutenant General Parent, Ms. Homer, men and women of the United States Armed Forces, men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great honor that I represent the government and people of Canada at this solemn occasion. Today, we remember more than 2,700 Americans, 24 Canadians, and more than 350 other victims from around the world who tragically lost their lives on September 11th, 2001. 13 years ago, the world watched in horror as these people fell victim to brutal and senseless terrorist attacks against the United States. For thousands of individuals, the connection was tragically personal. To many people, lost loved ones that day, sons, daughters, mothers, fathers, cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, wives, and husbands. Ms. Homer, please allow me to express my condolences. I am truly sorry for your loss, and thank you for joining us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, although more than a decade has passed, I have no doubt that each and every one of us here remembers the events of that day in September as if it was yesterday. I know I do. The events of September 11th radically affected us and the way we saw the world, sending ripples of change across the United States, across North America, indeed across the world. Canadians were shocked at the audacity and cruelty of the attacks. We were horrified by the invasion of North America, a continent that we believed was relatively safe and distant from the threat of terrorism. Our sense of security was shattered, but NORAD's reaction was swift. Close to 200 armed aircraft were deployed over the U.S. skies, and all non-essential United States air traffic was grounded. And Canada responded by receiving flights heading to the United States, 293 of them in total. Canadians across the country opened up their hearts and homes to more than 33,000 stranded travelers, offering them shelter, food, and comfort. The actions of Canadians that day stand as a powerful example of the Canadian-U.S. relationship. It is a partnership, I believe, is recognized around the world for its depth and its strength. And our defense cooperation grew stronger through our years of military engagement in Afghanistan. Indeed, Canada joined the international campaign against terrorism in its earliest days to stand next to our American allies. And by the time we withdrew from Afghanistan in March of this year, it was the largest deployment of Canadian military personnel since World War II, involving more than 40,000 men and women. These American and Canadian men and women fought al-Qaeda and the Taliban in the Arma Mountains, fought insurgents in Kandahar, and helped secure Afghanistan. And our two countries worked together again on the international stage. As Russia's aggressive military actions and provocation of Ukraine are causing instability, Canada and the U.S., along with our allies, are helping to bring peace to the region. Together, we are participating in NATO's reassurance measures, promoting security and stability in Central and Eastern Europe. I know both nations are committed to continuing to make positive contributions to international security around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to our increased cooperation internationally, the Canada-U.S. partnership is strong here at home. We have intensified our joint training and exercise regime so that we are better prepared to secure our citizens in times of crisis. We have, both together and as individual countries, made important investments in counterterrorism and intelligence capabilities to better detect, prevent, and address potential threats. We have also strengthened NORAD, renewing it in perpetuity and expanding its role to include the monitoring of our maritime approaches. This is why it is especially meaningful to be here at NORAD to mark the 13th anniversary of September 11th. Seeing Canadian and American military personnel working side by side at this impressive facility is a testament to the fact that our defense partnership accords us both greater security than we could ever achieve alone. Ladies and gentlemen, today we pause to remember the innocent men and women who died in the attacks on September 11th, 2001. We also pledge to continue our work to reinforce our joint defense of the continent so that we may never see such a terrible day again. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Nicholson. It is my pleasure to introduce General John Hyten, Commander, Air Force Space Command.
Good morning. Ever since September the 11th, 2001, our nation continues to mourn what was lost. Nearly 3,000 lives and the innocence of a nation that will forever be changed. Today I have the honor of introducing someone with a very unique and personal connection to the events of that day. Her name is Melody Homer. Her husband, Leroy W. Homer, Jr., was the first officer of United Airlines Flight 93. The morning of September the 11th, the crew and passengers of this flight attempted to overtake 4 hijackers before crashing into a deserted field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Had it not been for the heroic efforts of Leroy and his crew members, the plane would have crashed into its intended target, the United States Capitol, destroying more lives and the symbol of a nation united. In Melody's published book, From Where I Stand, she chronicles the events of that day and the struggles she faced in the aftermath. She epitomizes the very real journey we all must face in picking up the pieces, remembering our heroes, and resolving to continue to fight for a safe, prosperous future, not only as individuals, but also as partner nations. Melody founded the Leroy W. Homer Jr. Foundation in 2002 in memory of Leroy, a United States Air Force Academy graduate in 1987. The foundation encourages young adults who wish to pursue aviation careers by awarding flight scholarships. Since the foundation began in 2002, 15 scholarships have been granted, with 9 of those individuals graduating from 4-year programs in aeronautical engineering, science, aviation, and flight technology. While serving as the president and founder of the Leroy W. Homer Jr. Foundation, she also works as a clinical nursing instructor. She has over 20 years of nursing experience both in the United States and Canada, where she was born and raised. She currently lives with her 2 children in New Jersey and North Carolina. So Melody, we're extremely honored you accepted our invitation to be with us today. And ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Melody Homer.
Thank you, General Hyten, for the introduction, and thank you to General Jacoby for the invitation to attend this special commemoration. Prior to September 11th, I had accompanied my husband to this 10-year reunion. I didn't think this place would be one that I would visit after he was killed. However, my last time I was here, I had the pleasure of seeing one of our scholarship recipients and one of my favorite people who is here today, Courtney Shear, graduate from the Air Force Academy. After September 11th, we, Leroy's family and friends, formed the Leroy Homer Foundation. Leroy earned his private pilot license prior to starting here at the Academy, and we wanted to provide this first step to others with the love and passion for aviation to be able to take their first step with us. We currently have 5 men and women in uniform, 3 Air Force pilots, 2 Navy, and 1 Marine. The past 2 years, our recipients have indicated that after high school, the Academy is their first choice. I want to talk a little bit about September 11th, 2001. Some of you might be a little young to remember all the details. Leroy and I had been married for 3.5 years. Our daughter was 10 months old, 5 weeks away from her first birthday. Leroy had flown a Boston trip and bought her an outfit for the occasion. To this day, it is hard for me to believe still that my husband went to work and never came home. To this day, I think it's hard for us to conceptualize the loss of 2,973 lives. Using airplanes as weapons of mass destruction to take innocent lives and destroy symbols of this country's freedoms was unimaginable. Over the years, I have heard the many stories of other people that lost their lives that day. I myself had never imagined scenarios where young children lost both parents in the Twin Towers, or the wives that took their own lives in the months after September 11th, having lost their husbands. And then, of course, the first responders. Many lost their lives that day. Many lost them years later when the toxic air they breathed that day finally ended their lives. Our governments worked quickly. Homeland Security was created. NORAD was working with the Canadian government to keep the airspace safe over North America. And I say on behalf of both countries, we are grateful for your protection and keeping us safe for the past 13 years. And on occasions such as this, we are reminded that we do have to continue to be vigilant. Those who wish to harm our way of life will never stop trying. In 2011, a study co-chaired by United Airlines and Boeing was completed. The issue at hand was that there was no good way to protect the cockpit from intrusion when the door needed to be opened during flight for the pilots to use the restroom, get their meals, or take crew breaks on long-haul flights. The results of this study was a safety device created called a secondary barrier. It is a steel mesh door that is locked into place when the reinforced cockpit door has to be opened. The research suggests that this is the most effective way of protecting the cockpit. Some airlines currently have them. However, about a year and a half ago, myself, as well as Ellen Saraceni, who is the widow of Victor Saraceni, captain of 175, received information that, in fact, these barriers were being removed from Boeing airliners. It had been decided they were unnecessary because of all the other layers of security. I'm aware of two personally: the Federal Air Marshal Program and the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, which unfortunately have had their budgets cut. As I was flying out here yesterday, I thought of an analogy in my own life. My father is 81 years old and has mobility issues. He is at my home right now, and as a nurse, I know that hip fractures in the elderly come with a high mortality rate. So when my dad comes to visit, I pull out all the devices I've acquired over the years to prevent him from falling, and I'm constantly looking for ways to keep him from having a fall. So how many times has my dad fallen? 0. Since September 11th, there have been 33 attempted cockpit breaches globally, 5 being successful, but fortunately not a part of any act of terrorism, and injuries to the pilots were minimal. The reason for the layers of security is this: 13 years ago, we said never again. Right now, there is a House bill with at least 60 bipartisan co-sponsors and a companion bill in the Senate to have these secondary doors installed. As the years have gone by, it seems we've forgotten the promise we made and the promises we were given. I believe one of the keys to ensuring another 9/11 doesn't happen is to address and act on any vulnerabilities we know about while the agencies tasked with stopping potential attacks before they reach our soil continue to do their jobs. The world is dealing with many difficult situations right now. ISIS, the situation in the Ukraine, the Ebola virus, situations that require difficult decisions and solutions. I do not believe this is one of those issues. As quickly as we were able to shore up our security after September 11th, 2001, I believe we can do the same with secondary barriers. A value cannot be placed on a human life. We all fundamentally believe this. In this dangerous and unstable world, eternal vigilance is the high price we pay for our freedoms. When I was asked to attend this ceremony, I was told that the doors to the bunker had not been closed since the end of the Cold War until September 11th, 2001. I hope and pray they will never need to be closed again. Thank you.
Melody, we have a small gift for you, and what we have, and I'm looking for him. He's coming. This is a piece of granite that's been blasted from the heart of our beautiful Cheyenne Mountain. It represents the Cold War generation that had the strength and the courage to confront and prevail against the threat of that era. And it provides us strength and inspiration to prevail against the threats today. Melody, thank you for your strength, your courage, and your inspiration today, and for joining us. Okay. A great reminder. Thank you, Melanie. So what are my thoughts on this 13th anniversary of 9/11? And many of them you've heard before from other speakers at other anniversaries. But first and foremost, we're gathered to remember and to honor the lives lost on that day, as are millions of others across the country and around the world. And we have done that every year, and we will always do it, and we always must. And we also honor those men and women from many countries who have taken the fight to our extremist enemies over these 13 years, defeating and preventing further attacks on our homelands. In extraordinary campaigns of skill and toughness, they have brought honor to our respective nations and our peoples. We will never forget their sacrifice or their families. Echoing the words of the minister, each of us who went through 9/11, as adults, young or old, can recall in great detail what we were doing that day. Through the experience of friends, loved ones, images on TV that horrified us, even as they held us tightly in their grasp, and from our heartfelt anguish for our fellow citizens and their families who lost so much. But with the passage of time, there is a risk of those memories fading for the generation that follows. The after effects of those horrific attacks could lose their relevance to them. The profound changes in our country and the world since then could lose their context, and the lessons of that day could slip from our national consciousness. Today, as we continue to fight against another ideological extremist terrorist organization, I would argue that remembering how we felt on 9/11, remembering our commitment, has never been more relevant. I was in the Pentagon when American Flight 77 crashed into the western edge. The sights, smells, and emotion I felt are still etched in my memory. Being armed F-16s circling the Pentagon in the aftermath will always be a haunting image. I know each of you have your own stories from that day. My career path and my life since then, from duty in Iraq and Afghanistan to the Pentagon again, and now coming full circle with the honor of serving as your NORAD NORTHCOM commander, have been completely reshaped by the attacks of September 11th. For me, it's as if the first 30 years of my career were just prep work for the decade plus of war and hard soldiering that followed for the armed forces and the nations of Canada and the United States. I know the same is true for many of you in the audience. And while husbands and fathers, mothers and wives and daughters and sons were lost on that day, as a nation, we lost other things as well. Our sense of invulnerability, perhaps our innocence, as well as the more practical sacrifice of some of the freedoms we cherish in our homeland, freedoms that perhaps we had begun to take for granted. But we gained things too. as individuals, as nations. We rolled up our sleeves as nations of strong communities, and we committed to doing whatever it took to answer the challenges to our safety, our security, and our pride, like generations before us have done. We reorganized our intelligence community. We established the Department of Homeland Security. We deployed large joint forces composed of active guard and reserve in two greatly separated theaters of war, not just to defeat our extremist enemies, but to bring safety and hope to the oppressed people who are exploited by them. We regained a sense of patriotism, unity, and purpose. And communities here in Colorado, across the United States and Canada, supported their troops in good times and bad as the conflicts have ground on. And in so doing, by extension perhaps, we have found a way to thank the generation of veterans from Vietnam who were previously neglected and forgotten. And of course, we stood up U.S. Northern Command, which we combined with our Canadian partners in NORAD to defend more effectively our homelands. And in the U.S., we prepared to support civil authorities in our citizens' time of greatest need. Fort Carson deployed thousands of soldiers and suffered the inevitable losses that come from hard fighting and the wounds, both seen and unseen, that are felt by warriors and their families. AF Space, with its unmatched skill and professionalism, helped revolutionize warfare with its tireless space support to the Joint Force warfighters. And the national treasure of the U.S. Air Force Academy graduated a generation of serious, committed warriors to man and lead the world's most formidable Air Force. All the while, the citizens of Colorado Springs and the state of Colorado stood side by side with them. The world has changed significantly in the 13 years since 9/11, but it remains a very dangerous place. You only need to watch the morning news or attend my daily intel brief to know that that's true. The faces and locations of extremism have changed, but the senseless violence and hatred in its heart has not. And the families of James Foley and Stephen Sotloff are in our thoughts today. And the free nations of the world are more vulnerable than ever, even while our hearts and our spirit remain as they were on September 10th, inclined towards peace and cooperation. The fights of the last 13 years have been difficult and often tragic, but the challenge remains, and there are more fights ahead. We must look to the inspiration as well as the tragedy of 9/11 to keep us faithful to our values, firm in our commitments, and steadfast in our hopes. I was born in 1954, 13 years after the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. My parents, our history books, and our communities made sure I understood its significance and the historic importance of our determined response to that attack on our soil. I was taught about the valor of our heroes and the courage of our leaders, as well as the pain and anguish of the event and the sacrifice that followed, and I was inspired to serve. Today, the 5-year-olds of 9/11 will soon be voting or joining the service, and all of us must ask ourselves, have we told them the story of 9/11 and its heroes? The importance of that event, how it shaped the world and our lives, and will they be inspired to make the sacrifices and serve the way our parents, our grandparents did in the Cold War, Korea, and Vietnam? Will they understand that foundational truism of our nations, that freedom truly is not free? For me, that is what this 9/11 ceremony is about this year. Coming together as a community, military and civilians, Canadians and Americans, to remind ourselves and our families of tragedy and heroism, of sacrifice and honor, to affirm the goodness and strength of our values and our beliefs, and to assure we will not falter or despair in the face of continued threats in this troubled world. 9/11 is a sobering reminder that we as a people are best defined by what we are willing to fight and sacrifice for. and that we can never allow ourselves to tire in defending our homes and our loved ones and preserving our treasured way of life. We will not tire. So on this 13th anniversary of 9/11, it is about all of us coming together to the proposition that we will have the watch, not just today, but for years to come. God bless those who served in troubled times. God bless America, Canada, and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence with the wreath-laying ceremony. These wreaths are in remembrance of all who perished on September 11, 2001, and for those in uniform who have lost their lives in the war on terror. The I-beam seen before you was recovered from the World Trade Center and obtained by the National Homeland Defense Foundation and Mr. Don Addy for this memorial and similar memorials at Peterson Air Force Base, Fort Carson, the U.S. Air Force Academy, Schriever Air Force Base, and the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. In 2010, the 721st Civil Engineering Division teamed up with the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs students to create the memorial you see before you. The team created a design centered around 4 pillars. Each pillar represents a sentimental perspective of the 9/11 events. The first says, "We will not falter," representing the endurance of our spirit in our times of need. The second says, "We will not tire," representing the bravery and service of our first responders. The third pillar says, "We will not waver," in reverence to the lives lost and represented by the numerous paver stones beneath the display. The last pillar says, "We will not fail," affirming the persistence and dedication of those who continue to protect our countries from those who would do us harm. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for the remainder of the wreath-laying ceremony. These 4 wreaths have been donated by the Colorado 30 Group in honor of the 4 pillars. The first wreath is presented on behalf of the United States military by General Charles Jacoby and Mr. Don Addy, Chairman of the Colorado 30 Group. The second wreath is presented on behalf of the Canadian military by the Honorable Robert Nicholson and Lieutenant General Alain Parent, the Deputy Commander of NORAD. The third wreath is presented on behalf of the state of Colorado by the Honorable Joseph Garcia, Lieutenant Governor of Colorado, and Brigadier General Rick Martin, the Colorado Assistant Adjutant General for Air. The fourth and last wreath is presented on behalf of the local community and all first responders by Chief Peter Carey, Chief of Police, the City of Colorado Springs, and Chief Christopher Riley, Fire Chief, the City of Colorado Springs. Ladies and gentlemen, in a few moments we will have a flyover from the 120th Fighter Squadron, Colorado Air National Guard. Since we planned on inclement weather but have been blessed with sunshine, we ask if you prefer, you may step out from under the tent to watch the flyby at this time. The 120th Fighter Squadron will be flying the Missing Man formation. It finds its birth in World War I, but was seldomly used in the United States until the Vietnam War, when the public at large caught its first glimpse. The United States Air Force Thunderbirds were the first military aerobatics unit ever to perform the maneuver, and did it for the first time to honor the men and women who were then prisoners of war. Today, the flyover represents not only our respect for the fallen, but our continued vigilance in keeping watch over our skies to protect our citizens from those who would do us harm. Our ceremony continues with the rifle squad from the 4th Infantry Division firing a salute volley. As the last shots ring out, taps will be sounded by a bugler from the 4th Infantry Division. Again, pilots from the 120th Fighter Squadron, Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado Air National Guard will perform the Missing Man formation from your left to your right as a tribute and show of respect for our fallen brothers. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise.
In closing, let us pray. So may the peace of God go with you wherever he may send you. May you remember well on this sacred day and rededicate yourself to a life of service. May God grant you courage in the face of danger, comfort in the face of grief, compassion in the face of suffering. In the name of Almighty God, we ask these things. Amen.
Thank you, Padre Mike Adamczak. Once again, thank you for coming to today's ceremony. Your attendance sends a message to all that we will remember September 11th, 2001. Yes, we will remember. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the departure of the official party. At ease. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the ceremony. At this time, we invite you to join us for a reception located in the tent behind you. Additionally, you may take a self-guided walk through Cheyenne Mountain to the blast doors. Although photos are not allowed inside the tunnel, our photographers will be available to take your photo at the tunnel entrance. Tours and photos will be available until 1 o'clock this afternoon. On behalf of General Jacoby, thank you for attending today's 9/11 commemoration, honoring the fallen and those protecting our homelands.
That guy jumped up so fast that he caught her before she,
Yeah, he
she
did.
hit the ground. Yeah. Must have been seeing her. I don't know. Moving meters away. Yeah.
Was she not feeling well or something?
I don't know. She got her legs, and I just waved and she waved back, but I didn't. Yeah.
Is there anything? When I take this, do I need to do anything with it, or is it?
Yeah, you need to hold it right up next to the gentleman who's speaking.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead and talk to you.
Sure. Test, test. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? No, seriously, can you hear me now? I had a breakfast burrito. It was delicious. But I didn't get to finish it. Daniel's Tacos. Yeah. We cannot do the interview in Spanish, unfortunately.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
Nadie habla español aquí.
Well, we only have a few minutes, folks, so it's so work quick. Okay. Who's this? Okay. Are we in a malt box? Okay. Okay.
What channel is your mic on? I'll check real quick. I'm on 3118. Hey, Tom. All right. I'm on 3306. Perfect. We're good.
I think I'm wired here. Okay. There's another one more on. Yeah. Not in stereo, but. We're doing both at the same time?
I think it's just one question.
Okay. Anyone like to ask a question of the minister?
Absolutely. Minister Tom Roeder with the Gazette. Obviously, here one of the big focuses is ISIS in Ukraine.
Yes.
And you addressed that a little bit in your speech. Can you tell us a little bit more about Canada's involvement in both those situations?
Canada is very involved, as you know, with the NATO reassurance measures. We have deployed one of our ships to the area. We have undertaken exercises in the air and on the ground. And again, we've already, as the Prime Minister has indicated, we are putting Canadians, several dozen Canadians into Iraq to send the message that ISIS cannot be tolerated.
General Jacoby, Melody Homer said it best when she said that today the world is dealing with many issues right now. What do you think people should remember as we do move forward, especially with some of the issues that we are confronting?
Yeah, one of the things I tried to highlight is that this ceremony now is about two things. One is remembering sacrifices that were made and appreciating that. And the other is strengthening our resolve to meet the challenges of the future. That's what both our countries have always done. And it's important to remind ourselves of that and to do it ahead of the next calamity. And I think that's what the President talked about last night, and I think that's what the Prime Minister has been talking about. And so I thought it was an excellent opportunity to just remind ourselves of those two things. We have a duty to remember those, and we have a duty to steel ourselves for the future.
General, obviously during this ceremony, you're keeping a close eye on defense of the homeland. How nervous or not nervous, how alert are you to the threat of ISIS to the homeland?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm an infantryman. I'm not nervous.
I
understand. We have great concern, and I know we share those concerns with our partners in Canada. And I think that the President laid out a strategy last night. The military has its mission, and we'll accomplish it. Our mission here in the homeland remains unwavering, and that will be to defend the homeland and to prevent attacks on the homeland, and we'll continue to do that. ISIS represents another manifestation of extremism. It represents another chapter in the fight, and we're ready for it.
Again, this is part of the challenge that we are addressing, and it's important for our two countries to continue to cooperate with each other and with our allies, because this is completely unacceptable. This is a monstrous group of individuals, and again, we're sending out a message to them that this type of activity will not be tolerated by our countries.
Only a couple more minutes left. Anyone else? Go ahead.
General, this is the first year that the different branches of the military have been all together for this commemoration ceremony. Can you talk about the significance of that on remembering this day?
Sure. Yeah. We got together with community leaders, in particular Don Addy and Colorado 30 Group, and on behalf of the state of Colorado and the community of Colorado Springs, we had a discussion about what's special about the 13th anniversary. For me, I mentioned it. For me, 1954 was 13 years after Pearl Harbor was attacked. And it really did strike us in our conversations that we are at that knee in the curve where we really need to be talking to our youngsters and ourselves to some extent about how important it is to remember 9/11 and to not just remember about that day, but remember what it was about and what it means for the future. So we're delighted we had all the support from all the military communities, but we had support from across the entire community to include our first responders. And we're very grateful to give everyone a peek at our magnificent mountain that we share with Canada here and have for the past many decades in defending our homeland. Thanks.
One more. Going, gone. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.